What's up guys, it's Mike here, and this is the Sony a6500. Now, I've owned this camera for about a year now. If you guys have been following the channel, I posted a review of the Sony a6300, which I've owned for about 3 years. That was a few video ago. I'll link it up here if you guys are interested in watching that. But this video is going to be all about the 6500. Now, there are a lot of similarities between this camera and the a6300, but there are some very big differences, and I want to get into those today as well. But before we get into all of that, let's go over just some general specs of the a6500 real quick. So this camera is a 24.2 megapixel camera. It's a crop sensor aps-c. It's got Sony's Exmor CMOS sensor in it. It has 425 phase detection autofocus points, 5-axis in-body stabilization, which is, I'll be talking about that later. You can shoot 11 frames per second in a high plus mode, continuous shooting, and that's if you don't want to look at the live view, or 8 frames per second in high mode if you do want to look at the live view. You can also record in 1080p at 120 frames per second and 4K at 30 frames per second. So in terms of the aesthetics of the camera, the 6500 is pretty much the same as the 6300, and it's funny, I normally film videos with this camera, but since I'm doing a review of this camera, I'm filming with the 6300 right now. If I had a third camera to use, I would put this camera and the 6300 side by side so you guys could kind of see them lined up. They feel the exact same in the hand, and I really don't think there's any difference at all. One of the biggest differences between the 6500 and the 6300 is the menu system, and that was actually, in fact, one of the first big differences that I noticed when I first started using this camera. So the 6300, there are like 6 main menu categories that are lined up at the very top, and underneath them there are a total of about 29 different sub-menus that you can navigate through each of those 6 main menus. The 6500 has a lot more of those sub-menus. It still has the main, the 6 menus at the top, but the 6500, its sub-menus that you can navigate through increased to 35. That's almost a 20% increase. Now, to me, this is both a pro and a con in different ways. I'm always a fan of having more options when it comes to technology. And due to the extra options and technology that's built in the 6500, it just gives the user more to do. You have there's more capability to this camera than there is to the 6300. The downside of that, with all of these extra options in the menu, it makes navigating the menu all that much longer, even if you know exactly where you need to go. The first 2 camera menus themselves have 23 options to go through. 23? Yeah, 23. Whereas the 6300 had substantially less than that. So again, the menu system was kind of like one of the biggest differences that I noticed when I first started using this camera. Like I said before, I'm using the a6500 primarily for video, but I'm really just doing like basic vlogging and filming videos here in the apartment, like you guys have seen if you've been following the channel. I really haven't gotten into at all the video capabilities this camera has to offer. There are so many more capabilities built into the 6500 than there are in the 6300, which is one of the reasons I picked this camera up. I have done a few practice cinematic B-roll things. I've never put those on YouTube. I may start getting into that more in the future. I'd like to. All the extra video capabilities this camera has to offer, unfortunately I haven't really used them yet all that much. But those are here, and again, that's one of the reasons I picked this camera up, because I do eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, want to get into all that. Okay, now that we've gotten the menu system out of the way, let's get into another kind of general observations that I've had about the a6500, and that's temperature. Now, some Sony users has complained about the temperature of, maybe not this camera so much, but the a6000, the a6300. I've never used the a6000. I have the a6300. The a6300 has never overheated. It gets warmer than this camera does. This camera, it gets warm when it's recording, but it's in my experience, it's never gotten all that warm at all, and it's never overheated on me. I film in 1080p all the time. I filmed in 4K every now and then. I've done some experimentation with 4K. I really don't have all that much use for it. The couple of times that I did film in 4K on the 6500, temperature's been fine. So let's talk about some things that I just absolutely enjoy about using the 6500. Number one is the image stabilization that's built into the camera itself. A lot of Sony lenses have stabilization built within the lens. It's called OSS, is what it's abbreviated as. I believe the a6500 is the only crop sensor mirrorless camera that Sony makes that has the in-body image stabilization. I don't think the a64 has it built in. The a6300 definitely doesn't, which makes shooting and filming with vintage lenses and lenses that are not Sony branded lenses much more enjoyable on this camera, on the a6500, than shooting or filming on the same lenses on the a6300 would be. For example, The lens I'm using right now is a Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens. That does not have stabilization built into it. So if I wanted to use this lens with the a6300 without a tripod, it would be shaking all over the place. Vlogging with that lens would be, unless I had a gimbal or something like that, would be very difficult. With this camera, it's a breeze. It's really easy. You don't have to worry about shaking, or you don't have to worry about too much shaking. I mean, you know, there is a little bit of shaking involved with this camera, but it's not nearly as noticeable as it is with the a6300. The second thing I love about the a6500 is what's called onboard noise reduction, and I don't think this option is in the a6300. At least I haven't figured out where it is in the menu, if it is in there. But basically what onboard noise reduction does is, and this is particularly useful for like astrophotography and images at high ISO, is basically there's some post-processing that goes on in the camera itself to help reduce noise. The downside to that is that after you take the photo, it takes a little bit longer to process where you can view it on the monitor here. It takes like an extra second or two. I haven't particularly used that option all that much, but if it does work, and if you do want something like, if you do want to use it, it's there. The third thing I love about the Sony a6500, and I mentioned this in the Sony a6300 review, is the size and weight of this camera. I think this camera weighs 453 grams, which is about 1 pound, which makes vlogging with it just a breeze. I mean, vlogging, especially if you have a lightweight lens like the Sony 10 to 18 millimeter. The fourth thing I absolutely love about this camera, and I kind of touched on it before, is the video. The video on this camera, in my opinion, the 6500 was made a lot more for video than the a6300 was. There are a lot more video options in here. Like I said, I hope to get into those a little bit more in the future, but the video quality from the 6500 is just outstanding. I've used the 6300 for video a little bit, but it's been a long time since I've actually vlogged with this camera. I used to vlog with this camera a lot when I first started my channel, but I do all my vlogging now with this camera, and I have a lot more experience with this in terms of video than I did with the 6300. And I gotta say, like, for a crop sensor, it's pretty good. The fifth and final thing that I'll mention about the 6500 that I just absolutely enjoy is the touchscreen focus. Now this comes in handy when the focus, when the camera's not focusing exactly how you want it to. And you know, it's especially useful in wide aperture situations, or situations where like there may be a person in frame and the camera is focusing on that person rather than something in the background that you may want it to focus on instead. Or really like in a, you know, the wide aperture situation where you have something in the foreground and something in the background, and let's say the camera's focusing on the object in the foreground, where you actually want it to focus on the object in the background. On the 6300, what I would have to do if I wanted to change where the camera's focusing is go into manual focus, adjust the focus ring on the lens, and, you know, do some trial and error until I got that correct. With the 6500, all you have to do is just touch where you want the camera to focus, and the camera will stay focusing in that plane even if you move it around, which I thought was super cool. Unfortunately, however, you cannot navigate the menu system with the touchscreen. I'm not sure why you can't. I would assume it wouldn't be all that difficult to program that in, especially since touch focusing is already programmed in. When I first figured out that you could do touch focusing with this camera, I was very excited, and then I was pretty disappointed when I was like, well, wait, you can't actually navigate the menu system with your finger either. I'm sure there's a reason that Sony chose to do that. It would have been, in my opinion, it would have been nice to be able to navigate the menu system with the touchscreen as well. Okay, so now that we've gone over some things that I really enjoy about the 6500, let's go over some things that I've found to be somewhat frustrating, or things I just don't like at all about the camera. In my opinion, there are a lot more good things about the 6500 than there are bad things. There are a lot more pros than there are cons, but there are some things that I find just kind of frustrating. No camera's perfect, and you know, some of these are just personal opinion, preference. The first thing that I've noticed that I don't particularly like with the a6500, and this doesn't happen all that much, is that sometimes it'll just randomly stop recording. Like I said, I use this camera for vlogging, for B-roll, for stuff like that all the time. And on a few occasions, it's just stopped recording. No reason. It didn't overheat, didn't get any, you know, heat warning messages on the screen or whatever. It just stopped. It's very annoying. Like I said, it's only happened a few times in the past, maybe not even 3 times, maybe 2 times in the past year that I've owned it. But it makes filming videos like this, it makes me paranoid, because I'm like, okay, well, this has happened twice before. Am I gonna finish recording and then go back and kind of replay it and see how things went, just to notice that the camera stopped recording halfway through what I was saying, and I have to redo an entire sequence of video. And I'm not sure if it's just this particular model or whatever, or if that's fairly common with the 6500s. I'm not sure. It could just be something weird with my camera. Okay, this next one is something that frustrated me with the a6300. I'm really not sure why Sony didn't put this option in the a6500, but the second thing I really don't like about this camera is that there is no flip around screen. I mean, the 6500 is built for video. Do you guys see this? Do you see how limited the motion is of this screen? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm glad that, like, you know, it moves around this much, but you can't flip it around, you can't flip it up, you can't flip it to the side, you can't flip it to the bottom. Not only is this camera specifically designed more for video than the other Sony crop sensor mirrorless cameras they produce, but this is their most expensive crop sensor mirrorless camera as well. And I'm kind of scratching my head why Sony didn't give the user the option to have the LCD screen flip around so where you can see it somehow. I mean, obviously you could pick up a third-party monitor or something like a Cam Ranger so you could tether the view to your iPad or your iPhone or something. But you're already paying top dollar for this camera in terms of Sony's crop sensor mirrorless price line. Okay, the third thing I don't particularly like about the a6500, and we kind of touched on this before, is the onboard noise reduction. Now, I like this option. I think it's pretty cool. The technology, I like that the option's there if the user wants to use it. But again, just like the fact that this camera has stopped recording on me a couple times, the auto noise reduction feature seems to come on just on its own sometimes. Even when I turn it off in the menu system, it'll just auto noise reduction. I don't know. I haven't figured it out. Maybe I'm missing something. If you guys know what's going on and I've just kind of missed it, or if there's some research online about this, please let me know in the comments, because this has been an issue for me on many astrophotography shoots that I've done. And it's not the most annoying thing in the world, but it would be nice, especially if you're trying to get a lot of shots back to back in a short time frame. Then you have to wait like an extra 2 or 3 seconds for the noise reduction feature to complete before you take the next shot. It would be nice to just have it stay off when I tell it to stay off. But that's really it, guys. There are a lot more positives to this camera than there are negatives, and the positives far outweigh the negatives. I kind of feel like there's just something weird going on with my particular camera every now and then that makes these things happen. I don't think that this would be the case with every single a6500 out there. Probably just something with mine. And it doesn't really happen often enough to really make me all that concerned. It's just frustrating on very, very slim occasions. Okay, so we talked about some general info. We've talked about things I like about the Sony a6500. Talked about things I don't particularly like about it. Let's just get some other, I want to kind of talk about other random thoughts. In terms of how this feels in the hand, it's kind of the exact same as the a6300. It's very easy to hold, very easy to carry around with you. I mean, this is small enough to put in your pocket. If you have, if you don't have the largest lens attached to it, there's some some pancake lenses you could put on this that you could literally put it in your pocket if you wanted to. The quality of the photos and videos taken with this camera are superb for a crop sensor. I mean, obviously they're not going to be on par with a full frame. You get a lot more depth of field with the full frame. With the same lens, you get less noise and stuff. But from my experience, every single shoot, whether it be video or photo I've done with this camera, has been great. The results have been great. I've got a pretty big photo job this summer. I'm going to use this camera along with a6300 on. In 2019, even in 2020, especially with all the extra video capabilities you get with this camera, you really can't go wrong. And I don't have any experience with the Sony a7 III, which is built a lot more for video than this camera is, but that's an extra $900. This is $1,100 right now. The a7 III is like $2,000. So you get a lot of value with this camera, and it being a crop sensor, seeing the quality of the photos and the videos this produces is it's really good. So would I recommend this in 2019, 2020, and beyond? Absolutely. So basically, I'll say the same thing I did for the Sony a6300. So the same thing for this camera. I would recommend this camera basically until it becomes severely outdated. Something that comes along that's just way over the top technology compared to this camera that you can get. Until then, you really can't go wrong. Sony was the first camera that I purchased that was semi-professional, and I don't regret it whatsoever. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful if you guys are researching, Sony a6500 and things like that. I hope this helps give you a little bit of information, hopefully it helped give you what you were looking for more or less. If it did, please hit that like button. It helps out tremendously with with the channel, with the YouTube algorithm. Just tell YouTube that yes, you like this video. Let's promote it some more. If you guys are interested in more content, feel free to browse around my channel. I've got a lot more videos. Planned. If you want to subscribe for more, please do that as well, and I'll see you next time.